Today on Between the Lines, transforming your psychological blocks in order to free the creativity within yourself, with the award-winning screenwriter and psychotherapist Dennis Palumbo. Welcome, I'm Barry Kibrick. Dennis co-wrote the critically acclaimed Oscar-nominated film My Favorite Year, and just published his first mystery novel, Mirror Image. But it's his years as a psychotherapist, specializing in the creative process, that brings him here today. With his acclaimed book, Writing from the Inside Out, Dennis reveals that you already have everything you need within yourself to create your best work.
Between the Lines with Barry Kibrick is made possible in part by
the government of Puerto Rico's tourism company, providing unique vacation experiences from sport fishing to gourmet dining to relaxing with a book on a white sandy beach. Puerto Rico, the vacation destination.
I'm a writer today because I was a reader when I was 11 years old, and it was...
You do not need to prove your state of happiness to anybody.
Most of these speeches were as much as a month in preparation.
Characters, the heroes in this book, are seekers of truth in a story that involves a lot of corruption.
I don't get a chance to really talk about what's real, and it's the perfect for me.
Dennis, welcome to the show. It's a privilege to have you here as a guest.
Thank you, Barry. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, you know, I'm going to start with Larry Gelbart's words, because when my son read your book first, I have to level with you, and he said, Dad, you're going to really get off on this thing. And what I loved about it is what Larry Gelbart says. It's not a how-to book. You're not going to learn how to be a writer by reading this. It's a how-come book. Mm-hmm. What is it that... And I want to be very specific about this. If you're not a writer, what is it about anyone who does anything with creativity, an architect, a poet, an artist, a lawyer, a teacher, anything that requires it, this book is a how-come book.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that was so surprising to me when the book came out was how many people who are not writers responded to it. Because the theme of the book, you're right, it's not a how-to book. There's not one word of advice on how to be a writer. The book is about how to survive being a writer, how to survive the emotional life of a writer, how to deal with issues of blocks and procrastination and fear of rejection. And those issues are true whether you're an architect, a musician, a lawyer. And the theme of the book to me is you are enough. Most people, whether they're bricklayers or teachers or doctors or novelists, believe that who they are not enough. And what the book tries to reinforce is you have all the raw materials inside you, including your doubts and your fears and your concerns. And those are the grist for your mill. They're the thing from which your creativity is going to emerge.
Oh, in fact, you give a little anecdote in the beginning when a patient comes to you and says, I want to get rid of those
That's right.
fears. I want to get rid of that feeling. And then, as you say, but that's your stuff. You get rid of that, you've got no stuff.
That's right. That's right. I remember very clearly this patient saying, if I could just take all my doubts and fears and shove them out of the room, I would sit down and write. And I said, write about what? Those are the things that connect us to our humanity.
And when you started this, you said all those fears you listed. I could almost do every show just by starting off with the word fear, because that still is the primal thing that all humans, regardless what career, you're a sanitation worker, you're a plumber, the fear that you may not do your work properly, the fear that you're not living up to your expectations,
right.
the fear is, that's still great motivator.
It sure is. It's very much the motivator. And as soon as you can understand that the fear, like all feelings, the fear is just information. You know, our feelings don't predict the future. An actor could have a lot of stage fright and then that evening go out and give a great performance. So obviously then that fear and anxiety that he or she felt in her dressing room didn't translate to a bad performance. So our worries and our concerns, our feelings do not predict the outcome.
How do we accept those fears? How do we do that accepting of it without beating ourselves up? The first thing I would do would beat myself up constantly. I remember sitting there reading The Hollywood Reporter and yelling, "There's a guy I know, he's made a film." And it was just infuriating. But in fact, only with time did I even, sometimes, I still have to remind myself that accepting of that is the hardest part.
Yes. Being okay with who we are is, I think, our journey. I think our birthrights as a human being is that we are okay, worthwhile, and lovable. And I think we spend the entire journey of our lives trying to confirm the reality of that. And that means that all of your feelings, all of your doubts, all of your fears, all of your insecurities are what make you who you are. And to accept that, I think, you have to challenge what you think they mean. In other words, if I'm sitting down to write a story and I'm nervous that it's not going to come out well, that's normal. But if I think, well, if I'm nervous, maybe it means I wasn't supposed to write this story. I bet John Updike never got nervous before he went to write a story. In other words, the meaning we give to those normal feelings are what really sink us.
You know, you use this term, I want to get it exactly, because you even argue with the concept of writer's block, and you use this as the reason, and I think it plays right off of that. The tension between where you've been and where you're going.
That's right.
That is that feeling that we have that we're having trouble accepting. We're feeling like, well, we haven't been in the right place. We're not going to the right place. And right now, this ain't the right place.
Absolutely.
So that's the
Absolutely.
tension.
That's the tension. I mean, when I talk about, I remember when I speak to audiences, their jaws drop when I tell them that writer's block is good news for a writer. Because it means that you're about to transition from one plateau of work to another. I look at writer's blocks like natural and inevitable growth steps. You know, the way a toddler has to fall down, get up until he or she masters the ability to walk. It's a developmental stage that a child has to go through. I think artists of all types, all creative people, have to go through have to navigate certain blocks. And the proof of this, I think, is I've never met a writer who didn't feel that he or she was a better writer on the other side of a block, who didn't feel that they had grown, that their work had achieved more personal relevancy and had a deeper quality to it after having navigated through a very difficult block.
Well, you say even that all of the writing even itself, and I'll take it out of the writer. All life is autobiographical,
It is.
literally and
Yes.
figuratively. You know, we're all trying to figure this thing out. And in particular, if you are dealing with any creativity, you've got to be figuring it out from yourself. It
That's
is
right.
the only material we really do have and understand.
That's right. Ray Bradbury said there is only one type of story in the world, your story. And everyone who is writing knows that that's true. So if you're Ian Fleming and you're writing about spies, James Bond is your fantasy of what it would be like to be a spy. I mean, even when you think of clinical material, when you read Freud, you don't learn about man. You learn about what Freud believed about man.
Isn't that, and we don't, and in fact, you say this is the funniest part. Get out of your own way. Now that's an interesting dichotomy. So everything is autobiographical, yet we've got to get out of our own way, and you admit, so easy to say, but so hard to do.
Yes.
But isn't that funny? So let's go over that dichotomy first of all. If we're talking about creativity in general, whether it's an Einstein or writer, as we said, we got to get out of our own way, and yet it's got to be about us.
Yes, that's right.
That's a delicate balance.
That's why I call it simple but not easy. Pablo Casal said, learn the notes and forget about them. And what you have to do as a creative person is coexist between all of those roiling feelings that you have with the idea that I have to work through them, I have to use them. I can get out of my own way if I'm scared, anxious, concerned that I don't know what I'm doing, if I stay with it and trust that whatever is inside me that needs to create will do so. And the more authentic you are, the more you do what you have to do.
And you go one step even deeper, and you say that action, whatever it is. In this case, it's writing begets writing, but I believe it could translate into any other form of creative endeavor. You've got to do the work,
Yes.
and you've got to do the work for the sake of the work,
Right.
not for anything else that might be attached to it.
The happiest creative people I know are the ones for whom the process of doing the work is the gratification. If you're a screenwriter, it's great when the movie gets made, it's great when it wins an award, but you're going to spend 99% of your time writing, not standing up on stages and holding statues. So it's the love of the process, it's the doing of the thing that I think gives us the most creative satisfaction.
But then you hit us with those two words. You call it the same side of the coin, faith and doubt.
That's right.
So, you know, on one hand, you've got, you can't get into that kind of realm without faith, and you can't spend one moment without doubt.
That's right. Faith has no meaning without doubt. Courage has no meaning without fear.
That's right. You have nothing to overcome if you
That's
don't
right.
have the fear. Then what are you courageous about?
That's right. And we all want faith. But see, faith and doubt to me are two sides of the same coin because they're both magical thinking. You know, you have the writer who believes everything he writes is wonderful and he's going to be a big success. And then you have the writer who believes everything he writes is terrible and no one's ever going to like it. They're two sides of the same coin. They're predicting outcomes that they can't know. The reality is we don't know what the outcome of any act is going to be. All we can do is do that act with as much integrity as we can. Every successful artist used to be a struggling artist, and all the successful artists I know still struggle. The struggle itself has no meaning. I've been writing since I'm 23 years old. I still get blocked. I still sometimes procrastinate. I still worry that what I'm doing is any good. I just don't hassle myself about those things. It's, you know, I've been in therapy for 16, 17 years, I guess. I'm as insecure and neurotic as I ever was. I just don't hassle myself about it anymore. And I think that that's the only way we can define growth.
Wow. You also say, it's funny you say, it's the only, that's a great line. I don't hassle myself anymore, because I want to keep that in my, no, that's really, that's a great way of phrasing it, because that takes away the blame with that feeling of even the self-loathing, because then I remember getting in that circle of self-loathing, then hating myself more for loathing myself.
Right.
So you need that one little step back. That sounds like a good thing to keep in
to
our
try
mind.
to sort of pay attention to the way in which you're conceptualizing even yourself.
Gumption. It's a word you use, and I like it because it reminds me of, I had John Wooden on.
Oh my gosh.
Bless his soul. I had him on, and I remember him with his pyramid of success. And he actually changed one of the blocks. And when I read your Gumption, I thought of that. And it was, he had the word willingness, and he replaced it with enthusiasm. And that's what Gumption does. In fact, the definition you even give is to do so with enthusiasm.
That's
because
right.
I was explaining to people, willpower is not that difficult. You can muster up willpower, but can you do things that feel tough with a sense of enthusiasm?
Yes, see, for me, it's, if you look at the clinical studies, for example, negative reinforcement never works. And sometimes willpower feels like, if I'm really good, I got to do this thing. And it feels like negative reinforcement, whereas gumption, or the idea of an enthusiastic intent, is positive. It's proactive. It makes you feel cautious optimism, if nothing else. Whereas a kind of steely, grit your teeth willpower still essentially says, if left to your own devices, you just lay around all day and eat bonbons. And so I think you want to be very careful that how you speak to yourself reinforces that your enthusiasm is good, your excitement is good, and that those things, though accompanied by anxiety, are the best gasoline to get your engine moving. Much better than trying to push yourself, shame yourself, or prod yourself into doing something.
And you have one more thing that really took me by surprise. it's even more important than this word, inspiration. You have an interesting thing here about inspiration, because we all think one must be inspired, or the muse must come in, whisper in the ear what we're supposed to do. You actually find that to be a negative notion to some extent. And I'm certain that you're not, you know, people do get inspired to do things. We even talked about epiphanies one might have. But if we're waiting for some sort of inspiration, we're negating the craft that's required for whatever endeavor we're seeking.
Yes, I think inspiration, the concept of inspiration, does a real disservice to writers. It makes them believe that there's some kind of quality that they don't have that's supposed to come to them. In my experience, you work really hard and consistently, and if you're lucky, inspiration comes. But, you know, Moravia said, I pray for inspiration, but I sweat at the typewriter 5 hours a day. And I think that's the way to do it.
You have a line here that I think everyone faces at one time or another. Lately, I don't like the things I love. I don't know how to express it any better than that. That seems to be something that anyone in any field at some time or another is going to make this, what the heck am I doing here?
Right. That's very common. And people are frightened by it when something that they ostensibly love, whether it's painting, composing, teaching, they suddenly get to a place, I don't even like this anymore. I feel burdened by it. All the problems associated with it are dragging me down. That's just another stage that you go through. It's another developmental step where you have to say to yourself, how do I reawaken what it was that I initially loved about this? How much of my dissatisfaction is because I'm doing things in the same old way? I'm not allowing myself to grow or be inspired. Or more daring and I think more radical and yet more true is, I'm going to let myself not like it for a while until the liking of it comes back. It's like you have to let the water in the well fill up again.
How though, Dennis? How do you do that?
Do you ever see a marathon runner? They're doing 26, 27 miles. Around mile 15, 16, I guarantee you they're saying to themselves, what the heck was I thinking about doing a marathon? And while they're debating, they just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And then around mile 22, they take a big breath and go, wow, that hill looks kind of nice, and there's only 3 people in front of me, and I think I got my second wind, and God, running feels good. That's how it happens.
Wow, you know, I want to, it's funny, I'm giving you a plug for another book for a minute, if that's all right, because here's the next thing I wanted to talk about was this. The way that writing as a creative force, as you say, is a two-way mirror into your soul, an ongoing process of discovery and growth. And I'm going to hold it up because I think I'm going to have you back with this thing.
Oh,
it's
cool.
called Mirror Image. And when I saw the book and I said, well, I want to talk about that because I don't know if this book is about that. I haven't read it. But the fact that when we do write, it is an opportunity for us to turn that material and look within our own soul, thus a mirror image of what we're about, especially since the writing at any level, whether you're Ian Fleming writing about James Bond, or I think the example you give in My Favorite Year, which you do in the book, is great. You know, you weren't a Jewish kid from Brooklyn who wrote that story about a Jewish kid from Brooklyn, but it was still about you, it was still about your family and about what you actually were doing at the time.
Right.
So the process of any form of creativity does allow us to enter into that realm of soul. What more can you want?
I mean, the thing that gave me so much pleasure writing Mirror Image is the hero is a therapist, and the story, while it's a mystery thriller, it takes place against the background of the mental health community, both in a private psychiatric facility like the one at which I worked when I was an intern, and a large public facility. And it takes place in Pittsburgh, my hometown. So I got to revisit all of those places in my mind that I loved so much growing up.
Well, we're going to have you back with that book, but I want to give out your website. You'll respond to people who contact you?
Sure.
Let me give that out. Then it's a very simple one. It's www.DennisPalumbo.com. gumption.com as is. But with that in mind, there was something here I wanted to, and I'll leave that up for a second or so, but while it's going, I wanted to talk to you about this because we've dealing with it throughout the show, but it's a terminology that I have heard from my wife, and I think it's so important, and that's that feeling of being comfortable in your own skin.
Right.
Because that's what this is really all about. As you said, it is, we are enough. Can we feel comfortable within ourselves? It's that leap of faith and doubt.
Yes.
That is, it's a difficult bridge to make. And once you make it, you are, I don't want to say you're cured because you're not sick to begin with,
No.
but it is that essence. As you said, it's what we are striving for.
Yes, it is. And I think that one of the things that happens for a number of creative people, I mean, there's something I often say about people in the Hollywood community, you know, that people come from all over the world to Hollywood in search of an approving parent, and it's the worst place in the world to find one. But what we got from an approving parent is the sense that who we are was okay. And that if we didn't feel that growing up, we're going to always be looking for external validation. And the hardest thing, and the thing that all of us need to do on our journey, is to find what's called the internal locus of control. That who we are, authentically, moment to moment, is okay.
You are clear in here that we oftentimes do need structure. The writing does need to get done. We do need to set aside time. We can't just be in our heads all the time, no matter how much enough it is.
Yes.
We must structure, and we can't negate that. In fact, as you say, it's when you are physically doing the task, you're no longer really worrying about it.
That's right.
And that's really the best part about a structure.
Yeah, and I'm a big believer, I'm very blue collar. I'm very much a believer that good work is consistent, takes diligence. You have to work really, really hard. That's why often for writers I say writing begets writing. I think thinking about writing doesn't make you a writer, and talking about writing doesn't make you a writer. Writing makes you a writer. And whether you are a painter, a composer, whatever you do, the more you do the process of the thing, the more fulfilling it becomes, and you get out of your own way.
But there's a little thing you say in here, and I'm curious how this all ties in when I bring this out, and that is, especially if you're, and let's use now writing in particular, you're sitting on that blank page, you've got that block, quote unquote, you're not being able to break through. One of the things you say, which I think, again, seems almost counterintuitive, is slow down. And that's a hard concept because you feel already that you're not worth much. I know that sounds funny, but that's what's happening. You've got that self-loathing going on, and now all of a sudden you're going to slow down when it feels like, man, I better speed up. I need to write 10 more pages. I need to do this. How do you incorporate that, and how do you get to let that sit home?
I think the hardest thing for anyone to do when they're anxious and desperate is to realize that rather than pushing and working harder, the best thing they could do is take a nice deep breath and check in with themselves. And let's say you're trying to write something and you're desperate and you don't know what to do. Take a deep breath. How do you feel? Scared, thwarted. Then I would say, okay, what character in your story feels scared and thwarted? It's like as though you and the text co-create that which is being written. And therefore, it doesn't have that feeling of strain, like you're trying to break down something or bang your head against the wall, but rather that you embrace your own struggle and then write from that place.
That goes back to allowing yourself to recapture that enthusiasm.
That's right.
Isn't that what it is? It's allowing
Absolutely.
yourself the time to recapture the gumption. Because
That's
even
right.
gumption sounds like a word that's opposite of slow down, but in a sense, if done correctly, it would immediately follow it.
That's right. That's right. When we think of diligence, gumption, working hard and consistently, we tend to think of strain and effort. And the reality is the most effective work doesn't have much strain in it. It has love. Love and enthusiasm are the gasoline of good work, not strain, and certainly not self-castigation or shame.
You know, they asked Wayne Gretzky, how long do you practice every day to become the greatest hockey player? And he says, I've never practiced, I've just played the game.
That's
And
right.
What it is.
That's exactly right.
Dennis, our time is up. I'm going to end with your words. The more we learn, the less we seem to know. So we grope towards some understanding, some sense of meaning. And I want to thank you so much for sharing as much of that sense of meaning with us today.
Thank you, Barry. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you guys for joining us. Now, before Dennis leaves, I would like to leave you with these words from Writing from the Inside Out. There is no cure for life. It's not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be had, a set of circumstances to be endured, events to be survived, realities to be accepted, more or less on a daily basis, with courage, conviction, humor, and a modicum of hope. I'm Barry Kibrick. Whether your creativity lies on the page or how you deal with life, look between all the circumstances that must be endured and do so with courage, conviction, humor, and a modicum of hope. Thank you so much, Dennis.
My pleasure, Craig.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, want a DVD or transcript of our show, catch an episode online, or receive our weekly updates, go to www.klcs.org/BTL.